Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Sultans and Sneakers. I'm your host, Mahin the Podcaster, and today I'm actually on site at the home of Naveed Hussein, whose YouTube channel is blowing up, mashallah. You know, thanks for inviting me here, first of all.
No, of course, man. Thanks for coming out. I know you drove 30 minutes to come, so I definitely appreciate it.
I always prefer, we could have done this over Zoom, right? But we were talking before the setup is that, like, I always prefer in person, right? Because there's such a different dynamic with that.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's what people miss. And I think that as content creators, a lot of your stuff on your YouTube channel is in person down in this basement.
Yep.
And I don't know if you've done much Zoom stuff, but I want to say that there seems to be a lot of people don't understand. I think people underestimate the benefit of in person.
No, absolutely. I mean, the way that you can read off of each other,
right?
Kind of being able to jump in and jump into the conversation just more natural rather than that whole Zoom. Okay, no, you go type of thing. So I agree that in person is definitely better.
So I wanted to start off by saying that I left you hanging a little bit because I was telling you offline that, hey, you remember the first time we met? And you were trying to pinpoint it, right?
Yeah.
And we had a conversation, and I actually want to. This actually will lead me into a certain angle, because mashallah, you are a Hifz al-Quran, right?
No, I'm not.
What year was it you finished?
I finished in 2004 or 5.
And did you go up? Was it up at Elgin?
So I started in Elgin.
Okay.
Then I was at Masjid al-Huda, and then I finished at MSI. So it was a 4 to 5 year journey for me.
And this was like during college or before?
This was during high school.
During high school, okay.
Yeah,
okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So I listened to a podcast the other day. Mushid Uthman had a podcast with Mufti Hussein Kamani.
Yeah.
I don't know if you listened to that.
I just listened to it the other day too.
Do you know how he's talking about like the Hifz after the age of... You started when? Before the age of 14?
So I had, I think, maybe 3 or 4 juz... And like the big surahs already memorized before high school.
Yep.
But like going into it was 9th grade. So I think 9th grade is when I started really taking it seriously. So
was that something from a parental point of view? Your parents?
No, not at all.
So it came from you?
It came from me, alhamdulillah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was your motive? What like drove you back then to push that?
So I found that memorization was pretty easy, alhamdulillah. Like based on like I said, I had 30th juz memorized, Surah Rahman, Surah Yasin all memorized.
Right.
And I had a friend growing up who had memorized the Quran.
Okay.
And mashallah, he was a great guy, and we hung out all the time. And I just thought, man, I want to be like him. Okay. You know. And so like every night, I would just kind of start memorizing, and that's really what motivated me, was that if this guy can do it, and he would be balling, he'd just be a normal guy. And I'm like, man, I could be like that too.
And he's same age as you?
Same age as me.
Okay.
Yeah, same age as me.
So, segueing into how we first met. We met in 2008.
Okay.
I believe it was Memorial Day weekend.
Okay.
And it was a Darul Hikmah retreat.
Subhanallah. Okay.
Do you remember at Potter, at Islamic Center, Chicago, Des Plaines?
Okay, yes. I absolutely...
You were there?
Yes.
Okay, so I didn't get... You must mix up somebody else.
I think you're right, yeah.
And I forgot I don't know how we were introduced. I may have... Because I was new to Chicago. Maybe I had moved to Chicago in February that year.
Yeah.
No, wait.
Yeah.
You remember... So, the first time I heard Saad Qadri...
Of course.
And the Saad Qadri, like, crying Dawah.
Yes.
Right? I was like, whoa, this is... Like, I'd heard about it.
Yeah.
But, like, first time experiencing it... Mufti Kamani was there. He was 19. He wasn't even married yet. He was getting married later that week.
Yeah,
I remember.
And I remember his wedding too. I was at his wedding.
Okay, if you and so there was like Maulana Bilal. First time I met him there.
Of course.
I don't think he remembers.
Darul Hikmah started in our apartment.
What do you mean?
So I used to live at Rayan Center at UIC.
Rayan Center. Okay.
So back in 2005.
Okay.
Is when I started at UIC, and I lived in an apartment with 11 guys.
Right.
So it was like myself, Muaz Rizvi, they call him PK Powerhouse.
Yeah. You know what? I want to say I remember. I never met the guy.
Yeah.
But I used to see his Facebook posts.
Yeah. And he was the one who designed all the Darul Hikmah flyers and everything.
Yeah.
And so they used to have night classes at UIC.
Okay.
And so Mufti Minhaj, Mufti Azim, they would come back to our apartment.
Okay.
And we would host them and make them biryani, whatever. And that's kind of where all this was born. Adnan Faiz, I don't know if you remember him.
I know Adnan. Yeah, Adnan. He's a finance guy, right?
No. So Adnan Faiz, you might be thinking about his brother Salman Faiz. Adnan Faiz, he left now. He's been in India for the last 10 years.
Is Adnan? Who's the one that's with Muhsin?
I think that's Salman Faiz.
That's Salman. Okay.
Yeah.
One of them's got a shaved head.
Yeah. So no one's seen Adnan in like 10 years. He's been in India studying.
I think I know, but I remember meeting him there.
Okay. Yeah. He was absolutely there.
Okay.
He was absolutely there.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. 2008.
Yeah. But there was like a small little gathering, so it was a pretty intimate, like sleepover. I was, I knew where I was living in the south suburbs. I wasn't going to commute back and forth. They let us crash overnight. Why would I leave? So I just stayed here the whole weekend, right? No, not married at the time. And I don't know how we were introduced. I may have overheard you saying something about Hifz.
Okay.
Right? So one of the things when I moved to Chicago, I was like, okay, I'm starting a new job. I'm not married. I want to do Hifz. And I did a little bit in Columbus, Ohio, where I grew up. Just and the imam there was from us. He's Egyptian. Sure. And I wonder if like in some of those kids I was in Hifz, like the little program with, it was like something basic.
Yeah.
And it wasn't anything serious, not full time. I was in college, and I would like check in once a week, and help me out a little bit. Those kids ended up becoming like Hufad, and now they're leading like Salah. I remember they were young, and I was like at the time like 25, 26. Yeah. So I went to Chicago, and I figured like I'm gonna go. And I used to drive from Oak Forest to IFS for Imam Habibullah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you were doing his with him?
I started a little bit. So, okay. but I got discouraged real quick because I remember when I first read to him.
Yeah.
He like he's like, all right, close the Mus'haf. He bust out the Alif Bata book.
Oh, dang.
I told Fahad about this too, right? Fahad, Dr. Fahad Khan, his son. So I remember it was struck because it was like from Oak Forest where I used to live. It was like a 40-minute drive. And I remember meeting you at Darul Hikmah when it was mentioned that you were a Hafidh. Yeah. And I remember just trying to talk to you a little bit about it. And you were just like, dude, 40 minutes is not sustainable. I remember that's the main thing. You were like, you're driving 40 minutes? Come on, there's got to be a quicker way. There's no one in the South Burbs. I kind of mentioned that I felt like I was blowing off. I don't know if that was really accurate, but it's probably a thing you probably got a lot of people asking you for Hifz advice.
So back then a little bit, and it's funny because subhanAllah, you remember everything, bro. MashaAllah. I listened to your talk with Mort and talking about
Muhammad Sharif.
About Muhammad Sharif, and subhanAllah, your memory is crazy, bro. So I don't remember that particular interaction,
right?
But maybe it was that. Maybe it was a lot of people asking me. Yeah. Maybe it was just that point in my life where maybe I wasn't taking it seriously, and there was a lot going on in 2008. That's for sure. I had got kicked out of school. I mean, that's a whole different story.
Okay.
But but yeah, I really don't remember that. But yeah.
I don't remember how we were, but I probably overheard you, right?
Okay, yeah.
And at the time, I was like, man, mashallah, look at this good-looking guy's a Hafiz, So I was just like, just chopping it up. And I think why I asked you is that because you weren't like turbaned out or nothing.
Oh no, yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, average-looking dude. Who's a Hafiz.
Yeah.
So maybe that's probably relatable, right? Mm. So I think that's what it is. But like, as I think about my channel and the shift towards it, we got this book called Deep Work, right? That we'll get into with Cal Newport. I realized that maybe I shouldn't I never really after Sheikh Habibullah I was discouraged, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I would show up and he would be busy because it wasn't a formal program. I wasn't paying him or nothing.
Sure.
It would be like on the weekend if I could go, and without being in a formal program, it was hard to be consistent with it, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm looking at my daughter. My daughter's 9, and I'm looking into starting her with Mass. Mass has a Hifz program, and it's really close to our house, and she can just walk over. Actually, it'll be at her school apparently, right after school. She can just do it.
That's beautiful.
But I'm of the mindset that when parents talk about their kids and they want to put their kids into programs, Quran, Arabic, martial arts, whatever. I also am in the mindset that the parents should be participating for themselves.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so now to me, at the age of 40, this is 14 years later. I haven't done anything. That was literally probably my last attempt at doing any kind of Hifz. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm like, maybe that door shouldn't be closed.
It's a lifelong thing, bro.
You know what I mean? Because I think you hear people talk about doing a little bit.
Yeah.
I have a close friend of mine who I want to get on the show at some point, but I remember he was working as a consultant for McKinsey. Mm. And, these consultants, they work 100-hour weeks.
Yeah.
During his time at McKinsey, in those 3 years, he was able to memorize, I think, 10 juz.
MashaAllah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was like, yo, how is it? And I don't know if you know, we mentioned Mort.
Yeah.
Mort's older brother, Mustafa Siddiqui, who I got to get on the show too, did his Hifz on his commute to downtown Chicago.
There's so many stories like that, dude.
You know what I mean?
So many stories like that. Yeah.
As a parent, I think we let too many excuses and stuff. So you did it at a younger age. Do you have any advice for somebody who wants to get into it later in life, who's got other commitments?
Yeah, it's just about prioritization, making that intention, and kind of carving out that time, right? it's important that we carve out time to work out,
Right.
to have time with our family. But
Yeah.
like that time after Fajr,
Right.
if you could take just 30 minutes
Yeah.
and dedicate that to just reading Quran and just getting fluent in the Quran, reading that half juz a day,
Right.
that's a very good segue to start memorizing, right?
Right.
And then on your commutes, listening to, your
Right.
favorite qari and
Right.
stuff like that. I think that's a great start. And, sometimes it feels overwhelming that, okay, I have to memorize 6,000 ayahs or I have to
Right.
do 30 juz.
Yep.
Break it down,
Yeah.
surah at a time or a page at a time. Maybe have a partner, but there's a lot of different things you can do. And I think it's just about consistency and carving out that time each day.
I think maybe one of the other keys would you say is at our age there isn't necessarily a deadline to meet. Like when you're young, you maybe have a 2-3 year window.
Yeah.
But at the age of 40, you're as long as I feel like as long as you're memorizing, as long as it's progressing.
Yes.
That-
right, because if you have the intention, you're progressing, you die, inshallah you get raised as a hafiz, inshallah.
Right. So I think that's an important. That's kind of mindset I'm trying to.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people want to do things in a time constricted fashion, and I think if you're thinking about it at like an older age, and you're like, I gotta get this in 2 years, it might be too overwhelming.
I wouldn't set that timeline goal.
Yeah.
I think you got to look at it day at a time.
Yeah.
That short-term goal. Just like every other productivity advice that you get about accomplishing goals, like I'm going to make 7 figures by this age, or whatever the case, that same way you can use those same principles and apply it to the Quran, memorization-wise.
Okay, I got you. So, with that being said, I want to ask you about your channel, Naveed Hussein ESQ on YouTube.
Yeah.
You're well known in the community as a family law attorney, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, but
I mean, someone's got to do it.
Yeah,
right.
Somebody's got to do it.
But what drove you to start a YouTube channel?
So there was a few things, right? It was this one random day. I was like sitting, and my wife was out, my kid was napping, and I was like, I was thinking there was a few people and a few ideas that came into my mind.
Right.
First was Jordan Peterson said something, and whatever he has to say, his last video, all that aside, right?
Right.
He said something about how in this world, there's like the printing press, right? And so the Ottoman Empire fell because they didn't really take advantage of the printing press.
Sure.
And that was the dissemination of knowledge.
Yep.
Okay. The new printing press of our age is video.
Okay.
And this is how people are learning. So that was, that was one thing, and it kind of emotionally struck me because you think about the decline of the Ottoman Empire, how we didn't really focus on it, and then you have, us now, where a lot of Muslims aren't taking advantage of video, because they're a little scared. And based off my interactions in the conservative Muslim community, it was almost like frowned upon a little, to put yourself out there,
right.
So that was kind of one aspect of it. The other aspect of it was this guy named Raval Navikant. Okay? And he said that the old leverage, when it comes to leverage in terms of propounding, is labor and capital. Okay, so in order for you to be a good businessman, you needed labor and capital. The more labor you had, the more capital you had, you can make money while you sleep.
Right.
But the new leverage of this day and age is content and coding. Right? So those two things together really kind of propelled me into saying, okay, I just got to do this. I'll put it out there, see what happens. People will be watching this content while I'm sleeping. And also, it's a service that I want people to know about. It's an idea and an area of law that we're just solely, really ignorant about.
Right.
So that's really what I think drove me to do it.
And when you going into it, what kind of experience did you have with video?
Zero.
Nothing.
Absolutely. Dude, I literally put my cell phone on a stack of books.
Yeah.
And just had that. And the framing was all bad. There was no lighting, no nothing. And I just hit record.
Okay. And when did you start this?
September of last year. So it's going to be 1 year in a few weeks.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So I see you learned a lot. I come in here and you got lighting. A lot of people don't understand about so how'd you go about learning the craft behind this all?
So there's a YouTube channel called Think Media.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, everybody knows Think Media. Right? So that's a little bit of that.
Okay.
Kind of seeing how you guys had things set up at Mad Mamluks.
Right.
Just really just absorbing, and I'm just obsessive, and I have an addictive personality.
Right.
And so whenever I get into something, I just try to improve, more and more. So I think mostly experience and just YouTube videos, really.
Okay, so one of the reasons there was a certain moment when I saw something that you posted that I was like, I want to do an interview with Naveed, and it's when you posted that you were reading or you had acquired How to Read a Book. So it's by Mortimer Adler.
Yes.
it's a book that's been sitting on my shelf. It's funny because like people like think it's like, what? You're gonna read a book called How to Read a Book?
Dude, it's beautiful. Yeah.
I haven't finished it. I was hoping to finish it before we met.
Yeah.
But I've noticed talk to me a little bit about that reading habit and like, first of all, how'd you hear about this book?
Yeah.
And then, what's your takeaways and what's it done for you since you've read it?
Sure. I mean, as it relates to reading, so reading's just been part of my life since I was a kid, right? So my parents always were pushing us to read, always take us to the library. I always had a habit of like reading a book before I fell asleep. Even my sister has the same habit. And so, I would always pride myself in my little bookshelf that I would have next to my bed.
Okay.
And now that's grown into, it's on like my Instagram, but that's grown into like 500 plus books that I have.
Physical
now.
books.
Physical books. I like to collect the physical books. I feel like whenever I finish a book and I put it onto the shelf, it's like a representation of my brain almost. But so, reading has always been a part of my existence, I guess you could say.
Right.
And that's really what pushed me to become a lawyer too, because you got to be good at reading and writing and all of that. But in terms of
law students make reading sound sexy.
Yeah, I mean, you get paid to read, right? You get paid to read, write, and talk. It's awesome.
I used to enjoy it when I was at Ohio State. That's a little segue, a little side tangent. I used to like to study at the Lawrence College of Law.
Yeah.
Number one, the law library, the law school was fancy and nice.
Yes.
And I think it just gave you it had the atmosphere that this is where reading is, like, deep reading is done.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And the law school I went to, Marquette Law, they had just built a new law school, and it literally looked like Hogwarts inside.
Right.
Like big floor-to-ceiling windows, like 20 feet tall. It was, the environment is important, that's for sure. But the book, I don't remember how I got introduced to it. I don't know if it was Hamza Yusuf's, he was having a podcast on this book.
It's several years old, though.
It's very old. It's very old, and I don't know. Oh, no, you know why? Subhanallah. Mikhail Ahmed Smith.
Okay.
He had come to town to IFS, and so we took him out to lunch, and he's the one who mentioned it.
Oh, he was in town, like, recently?
He was in town, he was in town maybe like 8 months ago.
Really?
6 to 8
I just got his book in the mail. Oh, the Emotional Intelligence one.
That's a great book, too.
Okay.
He said he's going to come up with a part 2.
Okay.
Yeah, inshallah. So I think he might have been the one who told me about it. It's something like that, and he actually had a qalam book club based off this book, and he allowed me to join it with the other qalam students, so that was pretty cool.
Nice.
So I think that's how I got introduced to it. But really what I think it taught me was that this book is very valuable.
Yep.
Right? Like, there's hundreds of pages in here, and this is a expose of an individual who took years and months and hours to write this thought out, conveyance of their knowledge.
Yep.
And now you have the opportunity to hold this book in your hands and do whatever you want with it.
Sure.
Right? And I think that How to Read a Book kind of gave me that appreciation. And it also taught me how to read a book at different levels. Okay, so for example, what he talks about is that there's 4 different levels of reading. Okay, the first is like elementary reading.
Yep.
This is just you learning words, like, elementary student. The second is like inspectional reading. Basically picking up a book, looking at the table of contents, reading the preface, introduction, and kind of getting a feel of, okay, where is the information contained here?
Yeah.
Okay? The third was analytical. And that's like what the book is all about. And, I'm not going to do justice to it, and I would encourage everybody to read this book, because it gives you a lot of tools and practical tips on how to analyze a book.
Okay. Like
highlighting the key words that this author is trying to get out, the key phrases, being able to kind of boil it down to its essence. And then the fourth and final stage was synoptical reading. And that's what most professionals do, right?
Yeah.
When you become a PhD student or a lawyer, whatever it might be, that's what you're doing. You're synoptically reading, because you are taking many books on one subject.
Right.
And reading them at different levels to come up with your own understanding. And the goal of synoptical reading is to take in what all of these different authors have come to and now have your own opinion.
Right.
So when you talk about like shuyukh or scholars or PhDs, why are they able to have their own opinion? Right? Why do we, as a layperson, who are we? Because we haven't read.
Right.
And it's funny because I think it was Mufti, in that same podcast, Mufti Hussein's podcast, there was this thing about graduation, or maybe it was Ubaydullah Evans. There's this thing about graduation and how graduating is a very bad term because you feel like you're done.
Yeah.
But the classical way is that...
That was Mufti Kamani's podcast.
Okay.
By the way, Masjid Uthman, those podcasts need more views, all right?
Dude, seriously. Those are great views. Subhanallah,
I'm looking at it like, where's the views, dude? Like, yeah. I mean, Masjid Uthman, maybe I need to hire a marketing guy. I'm not volunteering myself. I'm offering free.
Yeah.
Like, to me, it's like, I gotta show love. If it's good, if I find benefit,
it's been beautiful.
Yeah.
I love those episodes.
Right.
I love those episodes. And so we were talking about how... I think I lost my train.
The graduation.
The graduation, yeah. So he was saying, like, this term graduation is a bad term because you feel like you're done.
Oh, that was Ubaydullah, because he talks about reading.
Yes.
I read this at Azhar.
Exactly.
And you know what? It's funny because when he said that, it made sense. I was hosting a friend in Chicago a few months ago. And I took him to Ubayd's class at Tatlif.
Okay.
We just happened to be passing through. We didn't play Maghrib.
Yeah.
And then my friend was telling me, when Ubayd came to my city, I asked him when he graduated from Azhar, right?
Yeah.
And he was like, Ubayd said, well, I didn't graduate.
Yeah.
And he actually took it literally like he didn't graduate.
Yeah.
So he's telling me this. He's asking me, and he's telling me this. Like, Ubaydullah told me he didn't graduate. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I did it. So I asked Sheikh Hammer.
Yeah.
Like, hey, yo, did Ubayd graduate? From Azhar? Are you? Because he said he didn't.
Yeah.
It's like, he graduated with me. I was there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's this confusion. It's like, no, I read. I
read in Islamic law.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about. That's what synoptical reading is.
Right.
That you've read so many authors from so many different perspectives that now you have the ability or like the stamp of approval to now have your own opinion.
Right.
You know, and so that's what this book is kind of teaching you and getting you to that level of being able to be your own student. Because a lot of us, people stop reading after college, or maybe they don't even read in college. But that's like the number one way for Muslims to advance in any subject.
Yeah, I think this will lead into a little bit. Before we get going, can you pass some chutney?
Heck yeah, bro.
Let's grab some of that.
Heck yeah.
Because I'm eyeing these, like...
Here you go, bro.
I'm like, I do the green stuff.
Okay, for sure.
Yeah, the green stuff is going to be people are going to be like, it's unprofessional, I don't really care.
Dude,
but,
come on, man.
But, there's an angle for this podcast that I'm changing. So, Sultans and Sneakers, right?
Yeah.
I think I've always struggled with what they call audience and what my podcast is about. It's hard to explain, right? So, I had an epiphany, I want to say maybe a few weeks ago, where I don't know what it was. I think it was after the passing of Sheikh Muhammad Sharif, rahimahullah, right? And I was listening to what happened was I had taken one of his visionary courses.
Oh, really?
Right before, recently, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I took his book Hero Club too, which is the whole how he that's Audible. It's a way of how he consumed Audible audiobooks.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is that my epiphany was because I've been consuming a lot of Cal Newport has we're gonna talk about Cal Newport and his book called Deep Work and his other stuff, Digital Minimalism, which I'm listening to right now on Audible.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if you've had a chance.
I haven't read that one. Yeah, I just had this
Deep Work. Yeah. You have the paper. I have the hard copy version. Yeah.
Nice.
But I was just like, the epiphany was, and this is what this channel is going to end up being, and it's not, I guess, I haven't articulated it yet anywhere, is that this podcast, the target audience is going to be very clear. It's going to be Muslim men in America. And I want to help Muslim men in America by live the deep life.
SubhanAllah, bro.
You know what I'm saying?
That's awesome.
So you're the first person that's actually, no, you're the second person that's heard it.
Yeah.
Because I had spoken to a couple of people off the record. Dr. Muhammad Gilan, for one.
MashaAllah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's someone I bounce a lot of things off of.
Yeah.
Good relationship. But with that being said, there's a lot of things that happen. Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
Somebody probably lives a deep life.
Yeah.
Because you think about, and by the way, deep life should be defined. I think people need to understand what that means. I think it's not a super crystal clear definition, but it's basically living a life that is in radical alignment. You're doing things that have radical alignment with your values. And Cal Newport talks about this as being radical has to be part of it. It can't be something that's really laissez-faire, really chill approach to things, right?
Interesting.
So Tim Ferriss, you combine it with what Tim Ferriss says. Tim Ferriss makes these decisions when he thinks about what he's going to do. It's like if it's not a hell yes, it's a no.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard that approach, right? And when I spoke to my friend who's also like, that I mentioned he did all the Hifz while he's in consulting. He now works in like private equity. He's a very successful guy, I would say. One of the most successful guys I've met. He's fairly young, early 30s. Yeah. And I see how he says no to things in a way. Because he's like, it's not adding value. Things that are neutral, he just doesn't do.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now, with that being said, and this is not a surprise to my co-hosts, but I'm actually going to be transitioning out of Mad Mamluks.
What?
That's the
Why?
Yeah.
Dude, when I think of Mad Mamluks, I think of you.
You know, this episode will release after the Mad Mamluks episode where we announce it.
Okay.
That hasn't been recorded yet.
Okay.
But like it's almost like you're in this inception phase where that episode will be probably recorded in a few days.
I guess I got to keep this on wrap. You're gonna have me sign something, bro? NDA, non-disclosure
agreement. Well, you can't actually. Well, and by the way, you're free to use your angle, your camera for your own channel too. Just wait till
of course,
the announcement's public on that channel.
Yeah.
I talked to the guys about it because I was thinking about it. Like, I feel like things. I never thought I would leave Mad Mamluks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested to see why.
You know what I mean? But I think when I started Sultans and Sneakers, it was kind of it's a side project. I would do both podcasts. I still will be on Mad Mamluks, right? And I think at the time when I started Sultans, it was kind of like maybe I could monetize the Sultans and Sneakers podcast or some way.
Yeah, because you got over 1,000 subscribers now.
You know, I just hit 1,000 maybe a few months back, right? And I think it was just like maybe, and I was in a job that I didn't really care for as much. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I was like, maybe I could. I had this idea that I could basically make podcasting a full-time thing. Okay. Right. And if podcasting is a full-time thing, I figured you could do 2 podcasts. People host multiple podcasts on multiple platforms, right? But then recently, I was like, well, now I'm in a new job, in a new career, new industry that I'm actually kind of like. Yeah. And I can see myself being in it for a long time. So I'm not adverse to this idea of like leaving the 9 to 5. I'm fine. I liked a lot of things about the 9 to 5, right? Yeah. And maybe it's entrepreneurship isn't necessarily something that I like, because essentially if you're going to do podcasting as a full-time thing, it is entrepreneurial in a sense, right?
100%, yeah.
And I felt like that also added a lot of unneeded pressure. But then at the end of the day, I realized, like, excuse my French, I was half-assing 2 podcasts.
Very interesting.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so there's I'm smiling because his cat's like checking. He's like getting comfortable in my suitcase because I brought all my stuff over it. But I think it was just like, for me personally, it was almost like the Mad Mamluks I've been doing that since like over 6 years now. Yeah. Right. And the value prop personally for me isn't as significant.
Interesting. I mean, wasn't that like the impetus for Sultans and Sneakers and all of that?
Sultans was kind of like, sometimes, see, with Mad Mamluks, sometimes there's a bunch of us that have to get buy into a guest, right? Okay. Sometimes there's a guest I want to just talk to, but it wouldn't make sense. The other guys aren't interested, so sense. You're not gonna maybe do the channel. There's certain topics I might want to cover, or I want to like non-Muslims about something that the Mad Mamluks just wouldn't jive.
Makes sense.
The audience, right?
I see.
I'm still gonna have non-Muslims even though my target audience is Muslim men. Yeah. Like a lot of non-Muslims bring a lot of value from a personal development point of view, or deep life or deep work aspects that Muslims should hear about, right? Like obviously, like let's say we're talking about Cal Newport. We keep not just Cal Newport too. Obviously, at some point in time, if Cal Newport was available to be a guest, would I not bring him on?
Of course,
you know what I mean. Yeah. So I think that's where it was kind of like the value prop. But that's how Sultan started. So there was kind of like the thing, and also Sim, our producer and the founder of the Mad Mamluks, he actually wanted me to learn more of the production side of things. And he thought the only way to really do that is like for me to run my own show. Yeah. A couple years ago, right? And at the time, I think I was like, man, maybe there will be a day where I just have to step away. And he actually told me when I talked to him about it, like that was, hey, I'm gonna like kind of transition out. He said, listen, you don't have to like obviously just, if you want to leave, you can leave. Yeah. You could also take a break. You can also just step away. and the door's always open. I think that's what it's going to be. It's more like, hey, I'm stepping away.
Open. Yeah.
Like, maybe there's going to be some time you're like, hey, Maheen, there's a guest I want to get.
Yeah.
And I think you would be a good fit for this guest. If you're available, I'd love to have you kind of come on. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
It's crazy, dude.
So I think that's
end
kind
of an era, bro. I still remember your introductions. I still miss your intros.
Yeah, you know, that was like the early, that was like before YouTube and everything.
Yeah.
You know, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Mad Mamluks.
There you
I'm
go.
Maheen, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Sheikh Amr Saeed and Sim.
MashaAllah, dude. There you go, man.
You know, but I think it's just another phase, but I think you know, the door's always open for future like collaborations with the Mad Mamluks.
And I think that goes along with, you know, kind of your goal about deep work, right? It's like, if you're not saying hell yes, right? And that's kind of maybe the vibe that you're putting off, and you're able to put that deep work into your own platform here. I think that's a good direction to go in, inshallah.
Right. Say something, I'm enjoying.
No, I mean, it is definitely very shocking. It's funny because before the show, you're like, I got an announcement to make, and I want to see your reaction. And I'm definitely shocked. That was not what I was expecting. I thought maybe you guys were going to spin off or do something else, but I never thought about Mahi not being part of the Mad Mamluks.
Well, I'm not an original member.
No, I know, but like, still, I think
They treat me like a founding member, though. That's what Sim always says. Sim is like, he used to always say, to his credit, you know, the first few episodes were, they didn't know me.
Yeah.
They started. But he was like, listen, man, you're always part of the family, no matter what happens, right?
Yeah.
So I always appreciate that. But he's like, and I treat you like a founding member, even though, like, because of the work you put in and the amount of content you've done for us, right?
Yeah.
But it'll be kind of like it's I'm a sentimental guy too, so it's like
that's what it is. Yeah.
So it wasn't like an easy decision when I really thought about it.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I think the other three can carry the show. I think it's a different, you know, they might have to evolve in certain ways.
They will have to evolve because I think what you brought, kind of that candidness and those one-liners that really, I think, you know, lightened up the mood a little bit. And because you have Mort, who's very serious and very intense, and you bring that intensity, but in a more like comedic fashion. I felt, you know, and I think that they're gonna miss that. I think it'll be very interesting. It'll be very interesting.
Yeah, for the round table, you know, because I think part of it is like, you know, you got to look at how your week shapes up, right? You look at your time.
Yeah.
And you know, we record Wednesday night roundtables, and it's just like, okay, you know, I think Sim was really open to the idea of me calling in remotely sometimes. Yeah. And at the end of the day, like, our roundtables work because we're in person.
It does.
You know what I mean? True. It's not going to be like three guys in a studio and I'm calling in from like Bridgeview, like 40 minutes away, right? But in the day, I realized that, hey, you know what? I'm going in there. It's just like we're setting up. Next thing you know, it's like 11 o'clock on a weeknight, and you're getting home. And if I'm going to make and I'm also going back to my mission with Sultans, is about helping people live the deep life. Something Dr. Gilan and I were talking about, and I told Gilan this, is like, for me to help people, I myself need to be pushing for myself to live the deep life. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't be telling other people to do it.
Absolutely. No,
right?
That's a good point.
And so, for my content, it's got to evolve. I have to read more. Mm-hmm. I have to be more well-researched in the topics.
100%.
Right? I just can't come in on a week. Because, you know, sometimes we can go on a round table and something happened in the news, and something happened in Muslim social media, and we just banter about it and pontificate. And, like, you don't have to be accurate. It's not even really accurate. Yeah. You just gotta spit something out. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how the Mad Mamluks platform evolves. Yeah. I think as a brand, it should always stay alive.
No, it should.
Right, because it's something very unique to the Muslim.
It is.
The culture, not only in America. I think our audience is more global.
Yeah.
I want to be very specific because I want to talk to Muslim guys in the United States.
Dude, subhanAllah, bro.
Because I think it's more, as I mentioned in the recent, people may have picked up on this when I did the podcast with Sheikh Yasser Qadi and Dr. Shadi and Sidi Hassan Shibli. I mentioned something about, I don't know if you listened to it.
I listened to it. Yeah.
Well, I was mentioning something about like Muslims in America, because I think there's something very specific. Our situation is very unique.
100%.
And I think that I want to like talk to that. And when you talk about marketing and your niche audience, they always say you got to like really niche down as much as possible.
Yeah. That's a good point, man. On your last episode, the Mecca Books one.
Yeah.
You guys talked about that book by Dawud Walid, Futuwah.
Yep.
I just picked up that book.
Really?
I just finished the intro and all of that. And it's interesting because it's coming kind of full circle. When you're talking about deep work or living a deep life, I think about that a lot, right? And how can I live a deep life? And what I think about is like the different areas in my life, right? Like I think about my relationship with my parents, relationship with my wife, relationship with my kids, my body, I have like 10 different categories that I try to hit on almost a daily basis to make sure that I am at least a 7 or above in each one of those categories. And this book, Futuwah, really kind of put it for me, or is putting it, and I'm just in the beginning of it, and it might actually be a very good basis for the deep work, different subjects that you might be addressing in your podcast, because it talks about like, you know, relationships and body and mind and all those different things, and it's almost like a blueprint for you or for any community to talk about these types of issues. So
interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah,
I'll have to check it out because I've heard a lot of good things about it. Obviously, Imam Dawood is a friend and someone that I haven't seen him in a while. Yeah, because COVID, but we still share thoughts over phone and text and whatnot. But yeah, it'll be. But I think when you talk about Cal Newport's book, so you mentioned earlier, and I guess people will ask, well, why is this Cal Newport guy like? Why? Because I think a lot of it's generated from his philosophy, and people are probably confused, like, why is he's not even a Muslim? Yeah, I'm like, yeah, but I think the critical thing is when you look at your audience. I mean, granted, a lot of the guys will probably be like Muslim professionals, working, either businessmen, maybe career guy, working in corporate America, etc. People like us. Yeah. Right? Exactly. Exactly, yeah. But religiously oriented. Yeah. Islam is their framework, is their paradigm, is their worldview. Right? And they're pretty much like, well, they're also Americans. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think Muslims need to. One thing I think Muslims in America need to like own up to is that we are Americans. Like, the British guys seem to have this like aversion to being that. I'm like, or British, like you guys. I mean, and sometimes if you press them, they'll say they'll always want to like throw shade at American Muslims. Yeah, you know what I mean. But I'm like, at the end of the day, like we are we're Americans. We're not unless you're making hijrah. And by the way, hijrah as an idea, it's something that's it could be part of a deep life. It might make sense for you. Yeah.
But I agree with the American style of it because I personally feel like however I look, I still think I'm American. I drive a truck. Yeah. I like football. Yeah. I'm into baseball. Like basically anything that a random American dude would be doing growing up, I feel like I'm American. I never felt different growing up. Right. I always felt like everybody else. I felt like a regular American kid. Right. And so that's a very good point that you're bringing up, that I think we do need to embrace the fact that, yes, we grew up in America and we have a very different American context. Right. And we need to embrace it. Yeah. For
sure. I was at a birthday party earlier, right? And I think one of the guys, I think Sheikh Amin told me this as well. He kind of alluded to this when I first started the podcast. Because I bounced some ideas off of him. Sheikh Amin Kuladia, from Darul Qasim. And he was talking like a lot of times Muslims don't know how to interact with non-Muslims, and I'm like, well, why is it so awkward? And I don't know if it's a Chicago thing. It is because I've heard of I had a friend, his wife used to teach a CPSA back in the day, and high schoolers, and they're about to be like, I think she taught AP something for that, right? And their AP exam was done, and I remember I was hearing that after the AP exam, she asked the students like, what do you guys want to learn? She's like, we want to learn how to talk to white people. I was like, whoa, that's for real?
That's crazy, right? Yeah.
And she was not from Chicago. She grew up in like a rural area where she was a minority. But I think people, I don't, like sometimes you see like, when you see sometimes Muslims in the workforce, you can just tell that they just feel like out of place. I don't know if you're in the legal field, it's different, but in career.
Yeah. No, I mean, I see that. Company. I see it in general, right? Yeah. So the difference with me is that everybody around me is Muslim. Yep. Right? Like in my law firm, I mean, we have non-Muslim employees and stuff like that, but most of my clients are Muslim. Yep. I try to work with all Muslims, be it my mechanic, be it my insurance guy, be it whoever it is. I try to create something Muhammad Sharif would always talk about, nation building.
Yep.
I truly believe that. I truly believe that we as Muslims, especially in Chicago, can build our own little nation, right? And have everything that we need from top to bottom. The only thing missing, in my opinion, is like our own court system, which, that's one of my side projects. But that being said, I almost feel the same way.
Yeah.
That when I deal with non-Muslims, it's not awkward, but it's almost like the other, right?
Okay.
And I don't know if that's a weakness of mine or just our circumstances. And I also think that a lot of these kids who went to private schools, like CPSA or IFS, they have that problem. They can't talk to girls, and they can't talk to non-Muslims. And I think going to public school has helped me do that. But over time, the last 10, 15 years, I haven't really had to deal with too many non-Muslims.
Right.
And it's kind of made, maybe not awkward, but almost like irrelevant.
It's a fine line, though,
Yeah.
because when I was an undergrad, I was the MSA president, and I think I mentioned I was in an MSA bubble, right? And I had classmates and stuff in engineering school.
No.
But, like, it was compartmentalized. I didn't really have friends, I would say, that were, like, classmates.
Sure.
But I think after working, I realized that, like, hey, there's people I actually get along with. And I have, like, close friends who are not Muslim.
Yeah.
But I think back then we'd hear a lot of rhetoric, like, when your formative years in college, the older MSA guys would say, you shouldn't be friends with the disbelievers.
SubhanAllah.
But they would say that because they would kind of say things like, I think the intent was good, that they could influence you. And in some cases, you've seen people be influenced in the wrong way, right? But I think once you, like, get solidified, I mean, you still got to be careful. Because the devil will always be out on the lookout.
And I think that's a lot of big hesitancy for people, because growing up in high school, I was a bad kid, like I did everything, it was with white people.
Yeah.
And I think when I moved here in 2001, meaning here as in Glendale Heights, like Daceyville and all of that, like that's when, I started becoming more friends with just Muslims, and I kind of saw my life change a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I think I kind of held on to that. And the other problem I think I have is most of the white people I've interacted with have taken Shahada. Like my friend Derek, for example, we grew up, he took Shahada.
Yeah.
My paralegal, she's a white girl, like she took Shahada. Like it's almost like if I'm dealing with non-Muslims, the only way I can deal with them is like giving them dawah. And maybe I gotta listen to your podcast to learn more about this stuff, right?
Well, what about, so where did you grow up in Chicagoland?
Yeah, I grew up in Streamwood.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not like.
It was all white people.
Okay.
I mean, I shouldn't even say white, non-Muslims, because it was a mixed community, black, Mexican, everything. But,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's where so this, like today, I was at this birthday party, and so I mentioned my daughter goes to all Muslim school, right? And this, like, we go to this birthday party. It's this like, amazing birthday party, like, right? It's like definitely. I told my wife, this birthday party is like probably a few times more expensive than our wedding.
So I saw the pictures.
So and I happened to, like, there's a guy that when I first got there, I was like, I'm gonna be bored as hell here.
Yeah.
It's just because all like Arab like ladies, right, and a couple like fob Arab uncles, right? And they're cordial and nice, but I'm like, I'm gonna be for 4 hours. Like there's not much I can really say. Yeah. Only thing I try to practice my Fusha Arabic with them, a little conversational. Yeah. I'll be like, "Hal ladayka zawjatain," which means like, do you have two? Do you need two wives? Or do you have two wives? I think it was like,
do you have two wives?
Yeah, do you have two wives? Or and they got to chuckle a little bit. But I happened to sit down for lunch, and it happened because I just go to the table where there's dudes, right? Because there's not, mostly it's like ladies and their kids, right? And you have Aladdin and Jasmine running around, right? It was an Aladdin themed party. Yeah. So I sit down, I just said salam, and I couldn't tell, and I didn't register, but one of the guys at the table wasn't Muslim. So we're just like chit-chatting a little bit, and then next thing you know, I'm talking for like 2 hours.
Wow.
And I come to find out he was big in like, one of his best friends, he's into powerlifting. He's a physician. We were talking about powerlifting for a while, and one of his best friends is like one of the big influencers in the powerlifting community. He's got 100K, and he's like, this is his Instagram channel. He's a PhD in kinesiology.
Wow.
And I look him up, and he's got 100,000 followers on Instagram,
dang, dude.
YouTube, and I was like, and we're just chopping it up. He himself is like talking about, hey, he was at the Arnold Classic, and he's giving presentations there, and he's got his own. He's part of his friends like biz coaching business and stuff.
Yeah.
So I was battling, but it was just like cool just to like chat. And I think he's not Muslim.
Yeah.
He knows I'm Muslim.
Yeah.
He's surrounded by Muslims.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's like one of the few non-Muslims in this low. He's a neighbor across the street. Just comes by. But I think it was like you have to like. But I think a lot of guys just don't have. It's hard for them to like really talk to him without. There seems to be this framework where like it has to be dawah.
Yeah, and that's exactly my problem. I think that's exactly my problem.
Yeah,
and it's interesting that you bring that up because I feel like that's when I'm in that situation. I'm very comfortable. Obviously, I can talk about whatever we need to talk about, but I always have like this urge to like bring up Islam, or like start testing their morality or start testing their worldview or something like that. So I'm very interested to see your.
So this may put into perspective on like how annoying this is.
Yeah.
You ever deal with like mashallah, some of our good friends might be in like Hizb ut-Tahrir guys.
Yeah, of course. We all went through that stage, but yeah.
I actually never. I was in Ohio. I never did.
Okay, you didn't. I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you sit down with the HT guy,
Yeah.
you could be watching the Super Bowl.
No, you're right. Yeah, I got you.
And they will try to like their purpose in that interaction is they're gonna try to get you to join their group.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
No, I got you.
And you know it's damn annoying.
That's
like,
a great point. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
right?
a great point. Yeah.
Now, granted, somebody might be listening to this like, well, the only purpose for living in America is like dawah or like that. I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. But at the same time, like, is that really effective?
It's not, right? You got to win over their heart before you win over their brain.
Right. And if you're just like, because people say that like, if you have, and I guess I don't have a problem necessarily if it's in the back of your head. Mm-hmm. Cause I won't lie and say it's not in the back of my head either.
Yeah.
But it's not the forefront of my head.
Sure.
Because honestly, I'm like, I didn't get this guy's number. I'd be like, hey, maybe I'll see you at the next year's birthday party.
Yeah. But like, those classes you took, right, on Christianity and all that.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
So like, in that framework, what was the intention, right? Wasn't the intention like the way that you're asking questions and all that?
That was more dawah because I think there you're in the space where it's almost like agreed upon that this is like, this is the terms of battle or of engagement, or rules of engagement are defined. That's, I think, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. And you deal with it. And when you deal with evangelical Christians, like, they can't have a conversation. And this is a more problem that people talk about, like, well, we want to, like some of the brothers will say, we want to, like, work with evangelical Christians on these issues. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't have a problem with some commonality things, but a lot of evangelicals, they're programmed to preach no matter what. And it can get super annoying. Yeah. They'll never get past that point with you. No. And for them, it's different because, as an example, for them, if you don't convert to Christianity, you're going to hell. So they actually feel this like pressure. Whereas us, we have this like interesting like, and I'm sure there may be different schools of thought on this, but
la ikraha fi din, right?
Right.
No compulsion.
But even the Ghazalian approach is that like you can't condemn a single person. You can't say this person is going to hell. Sure. We know that, and that seems to be the normative Sunni approach. Is that it's not perennialist. It's just like you don't really know. Yeah, the general like the Quran talks about like the disbelievers are in the fire. Yeah. But to say specifically, like, let's say this gentleman I met today, to say, if he dies, he's going to go to hell. I can't say that. Yeah, I can't say that. We don't know what his circumstances were, what his mindset was, he given the proper message, etc. And it's interesting because I was raised this. I forgot where I heard this. Even Sheikh Mohammed ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen, rahimahullah. You familiar with him?
Yeah, of course.
Of course. Famous Saudi Salafi scholar. Somebody asked him one time, is there a hujjah upon like the average American about like conversion to Islam? And I think he said something about like, and this is somebody who's living in the middle of like Najd in like remote custody, like somewhere in Saudi Arabia, and he was like, well, like why would there be a hujjah when their media feeds them this stuff about Islam?
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's where it's kind of maybe we don't have the pressure as much, and so I don't actually have that pressure. It's not like. Because I think some people have this pressure built on their back, like this burden. They feel like if I don't give dawah to this person and I never meet him again, and he dies upon kufr and he goes to hell, he's gonna call me on the day of judgment. It's like Allah, I met him, and he was a Muslim and he never told me.
So, do you think is the point to be able to converse with non-Muslims, or is it like become friends with non-Muslims? So, like, I guess what's the goal?
The goal, I mean, I think it's just to be
normal dude.
It's normal. It's not to be necessarily be friends.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think it's wrong. I don't think it's wrong to not have non-Muslim friends. I don't think that's a problem.
Yeah.
Right. But I also don't know necessarily that you should have like a clear-cut rule. I think people need to know themselves, right? Because it's a slippery slope.
It is, man. I see. That's the thing, right? I'm trying to think like, could I have a non-Muslim best friend? Yeah, I could have non-Muslim friends and non-Muslim acquaintances, but like, can you really get that close to a non-Muslim? You know, and I know that's not what you're advocating for necessarily.
Right.
You don't have to become best friends with somebody.
Right.
But yeah, being comfortable, I definitely see the value and the need for that because we're just gonna look like the other. We're always gonna be the other. And again, I think I'm framing it again in a Dawah sense, which I don't know.
But I don't necessarily disagree with you that that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it's in the back of your head, I think it comes down to the execution, right? Because if you end up like you're always preaching,
yeah,
then and it happens with like and it's you know what? It's the same thing with like your Muslim friends,
yeah,
or people you know. Everyone grew up with Muslims that are off the deen,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And what do you do when you have childhood friends that were Muslim that you grew up with? They're not really practicing. You know that you could preach to them, but you also know it's not going to be effective.
But what kind of preaching are we talking about? I don't know if most people are sitting and saying, you know, like TJ's coming at your door and, you know, telling you to go somewhere. I think it's more subtle than that.
I'll give you an example of like how this is a case study like terrible. So, a friend of mine who's an HT.
Yeah.
So, first of all, he's telling me we're watching the Super Bowl together. So he's telling me this while I'm watching the Super Bowl, and I'm like, bro, it's a game on. It's a close game. I don't want to hear it, right? Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just kind of like I'm listening to him.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you know what? It's just like, you know, mashallah, he's passionate about it.
Yeah.
Let him do his thing. But he's telling me about like how he's giving dawah to his coworkers. Like straight up, he's like, yeah. He's like, you have to accept because there's hellfire, and if you don't want to go to hell,
subhanallah.
I mean, obviously that's that's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
That just requires that's like no tact at
Absolutely
all.
not. Absolutely not.
Right?
Absolutely not.
So I think it comes down to like the way I do it is that first of all in the workplace you got to be careful.
100%.
Number one.
Yeah.
Right. Some workplaces.
So much so, Sheikh Hussein actually says, "Don't talk about Islam at work."
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Did he elaborate a little bit more? Because I'm sure he gets asked about questions
all the time. All the time. What he told me directly was, "There's no need for you to talk about Islam at work." Like, period. Mm-hmm. So much. I mean, think about who Sheikh Hussein is at UFC.
Yeah.
He's not talking about Islam at work.
Right.
You know, he's not giving dawah to the doctors, even though he probably had the most eloquent speech here in Chicago.
Right.
He's not giving dawah to nobody, and yet people are still coming. You know,
people know that he's Muslim, obviously.
Exactly, and they see his character, they see everything else. But his advice to me personally, I don't know if it's general, was, don't talk about Islam at work. You know, and I think that goes to your point a little bit.
Is it also because the whole idea of like you're there to work and you have a contract to work, and you're not there for dawah,
exactly,
and it's violating you because people can pick that angle too.
Yeah. And, you know, it kind of going to your deep work issue, I don't know if this is a changed topic, but I really feel like tasawwuf and tazkiyah is Islam's version of deep work.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
You know, living a deep life.
I definitely think that is one, it's got to be a key angle of it, right? But to kind of wrap up that whole conversation about what Sheikh Hussein was saying is that I think that each workplace is different. Mm-hmm. Some places people will ask you. And I think if you're asked, you could answer a question.
Sure.
I think if people want to like, you know, learn more, you'd be like, hey, well, maybe at lunch we could talk about it a little bit more or something like that. But I think it can be a really fine line. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we also understand people are looking.
Yeah.
People are searching. I think if you are, and I think as a tendency, we sometimes get excited if somebody asks questions. You know, we'll get like, "Oh man, this is
I can't wait."
This is gonna convert it, you know, and you gotta. And I think when I was going through my Alpha course, you know, the whole Christian, it was kind of like, I was only interested in Christianity, to be honest, from the apologetic point of view, right? That's where it came from because you actually have Christians to practice on.
Yeah, absolutely, that's true. You know, and those are the easiest ones to get, honestly. Like, old Christians, and I'm just kind of going without, like, they're the easiest ones to take shahada, I feel like. Like, it's the most natural progression for them.
Right. Yeah. You know, they can just, because most of them, it's just,
they already believe everything.
Maybe there's some cultural stuff they guys had to overcome. Yeah. They have certain perceptions you just have to break, and that's pretty much it. But going to the deep work angle, so the deep life.
Yeah.
So Cal Newport talks about like, you know, we're talking about personal development. You mentioned like there's these 10 things you're trying to check off, right? And I was listening to like, and I've had to listen to the deep life isn't really, it's simple, but it's not. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? The way he talks about it. He's a clip on YouTube that y'all should check out. I think it's called Core Idea Deep Life. You know, he's got the YouTube clips.
Okay.
Core Idea Deep Life. And he mentions that like you should break your life into certain subset categories, right? You've got like your community, your relationships. With constitution, it's kind of like physical fitness, health. Then there's like this whole intellectual thing. Like, what do you like? You know, Aristotle used to talk about being like a well lived life because he used to talk about reading. You know, you hear these stories about before social media, before like TV. Theodore Roosevelt would read a book a day.
Yeah.
You know, you'd hear about these things, and people would. And I think because we've gotten stupider as a society.
100%.
You know,
no attention. Yeah.
Everything is like on memes, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned that like this issue of tasawwuf, the purification of the soul, that is a deep. There's like doing like muraqabah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you know, which is like part of the Naqshbandi. That's specific to the Naqshbandi order.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of like what you're in silence.
You're in silence, and there's like different stages to it, right? Like first stage is trying to just empty your heart.
Yep.
And then if you get there, or you may never get there, and then bringing like, you know, kind of feeling the name of Allah being recited, or like then there's different stages. But yeah, muraqabah is definitely a, you know, meditation or a type of deep thing to get deeper in your connection with Allah.
And I'm glad because Sheikh Hussein, I don't know if he'd ever do a podcast, but like he's somebody, but I think he's like somebody that you could. Like, there's a few people you could look at, and some people, and some of the students even.
Yeah.
I'm like, these guys are, like, they're living the deep life.
100%. And that's what attracted me to all of this.
Yeah.
Is Sheikh Hussein. I mean, I don't know if much people know, but that's, like, how I got onto all of this. You know? And that's why I'm saying that Tazkiyah and Tasawwuf, not only is it the deep life in terms of your religious aspect, but it also is the deep life as it relates to everything else.
Right.
So much so that, you know, we're told, some advice that we got is pray Isha at the masjid, but get home right away. In the sense that you don't have to pray Sunnah there, you don't have to pray Witr there, you don't have to, you know, jolly around and have fun. Get home to your family. Right? And it's like this family-centric view on life, or you know, it's not all about what you think. It's not about sitting and doing dhikr all day. It's not. It's not about that. It's about doing ihsan and having ihsan in each area of your life.
Right. You know, I was like, because there's two people. Like, so Sheikh Hussein and the other guy, Sayyid Sharif.
Dude, mashallah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I got to know Sayyid when because he used to lead the Taraweeh prayer at like Dar Sunnah in Evanston, the Bengali joint.
Yeah.
Right. Him and Azam Hashmi.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Shaf Qadri. They were the old trio, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, this guy's like a director at Blue Cross Blue Shield, and he's like leading prayer to like 1 a.m.
And going to Hajj every year.
Yeah, right.
This guy will show up at anybody sick.
Yeah.
This guy's there.
Wow.
When I think of, you're right, man. When I think of deep life, I think of these guys. Yeah.
And so I'm like, this is what the community needs. Like Muslim guys in America, they're not going anywhere. They're not like talking about some like theoretical like hijra or khilafah or like kind of not to knock those concepts. People like we have a longing for these things.
Yes.
But like I mean, you don't hear them talking. These guys are doers. They're not like, and I think that's what I want. That's what people need. That's what we need to be.
Yeah.
Doers, not talkers.
100%.
Not pontificating about theoretical ideas.
100%.
Right. When I was in the steel industry, Saeed calls me up during the sacred learning, like their construction.
Yeah.
And he's calling me up, talking about different steel grades and stuff. And I was like, I don't even know this stuff. Like, you're asking it wrong. I know some things, but he's like getting deep into like the construction.
Dude, they fired their general contractor, and they contracted that building themselves. They had light experts to talk about the different Kelvin lighting in the front of the masjid versus the back of the masjid versus like, You
know, and I'm just like, okay, you don't see Saeed on Twitter. Right?
That's for sure.
You know?
That's for sure.
Sheikh Hussein, I don't think Sheikh Hussein's got like a face, because like Cal Newport's famous for like never having a Facebook account, right?
Yeah.
And he's got this whole now thing called digital minimalism, which I'm listening to right now on Audible, and it's about intentionally using social media.
Yeah.
And there's a real trap that we have as content creators that we feel like we got to, like, social media can play us.
100%, man.
If we're not careful, because there is an intentional way of doing it. So right now, like, I'm actually gonna, like, I gotta delete my WhatsApp probably off my phone at least. Maybe I'll check it on my computer. Like, some of my friends have done it.
Yeah.
But you realize all this time you're wasting.
100%.
And I'm like, how are you gonna do muraqabah? And Sheikh was saying, because, as in my prior life as a Salafi, I used to always listen to his stuff. Since 04.
Really?
So I listened to Sheikh Hussein's stuff since 2004.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like, people didn't know. I remember at my MSA at Ohio State, we were pretty, and I remember I was like, we should invite this guy. And I wasn't really hardcore then, but my friend was like, looked at him and was like, no, he's too Sufi. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is like 05, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
Oh, he's a hardcore Sufi. But I was like, yo, this stuff's super practical.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I was like, I could never hate. And I was like, this guy is always like, he's talking about like, I mean, there would be like the Sacred Dawah podcast about like working hard.
Yeah.
At work.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly, like giving the due right to the time that you've checked
right.
in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I think you're right. That's where I've benefited mostly.
Right, and I think and sometimes people got hung up on the appearance.
Yeah.
Like, oh, these guys just wear white kurtas all the time, things like that, right? Or topi.
The kurta crew, bro.
And I think they can't really like buy. And I think that's where maybe a disconnect. Or like, look, that's not really me.
Yeah.
But I'm like, man, there's so much you could learn from, and I think that's what like people need to get into a little bit more. But I would question though, from your experience, because you probably know them better than I do. Is there an emphasis on a kind of like what do they do as far as like physical fitness? I know he's big on like not eating a lot.
So yeah, I mean,
like none of those guys are fat.
Yeah, I'm not, and it goes down to like just controlling all parts of your life, right?
Okay.
Like from the eating perspective, I don't know if Sheikh Hussein's ever said go work out or anything, but like him personally, from my understanding, no sugar.
Yeah.
Watching what you eat. All of those guys are really fit. They don't overeat, and it's all about controlling yourself in that aspect. And being physically fit is just a result of that. Because if you're that disciplined, where these dudes are, definitely praying 5 times a day, praying at the masjid, going on Hajj, giving talk, doing everything.
Not sleeping.
Barely sleeping. I went to Hajj with these guys, man.
Okay.
SubhanAllah. I don't even know how they did it. The Azam Hashmi, Abdul Bari, and Saeed Sharif are the leaders.
Yeah.
They took care of everything. I don't remember them sleeping, bro. And that power comes from somewhere.
And the thing is, Azam and Saeed, they work corporate America.
Yeah.
They're not like
the
masjid cleaners, right?
Yeah, exactly. Something Sheikh Amin said once, and it was at a khatam where he talked about when you know how you're talking about these guys who read a book a day or whatever.
Like Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt, whatever. Mm-hmm. We talk about like Imam Abu Hanifa and like how they've read like they had 60 khatams or whatever in Ramadan, and the question is how did that happen?
Yeah.
And how did they write all these manuals and hundreds of volumes? What came first?
Right.
And the thing is that the Quran came first.
Right.
The barakah from the Quran came first to allow them to achieve all these things.
Sure.
And that's really the emphasis of tasawwuf, I think.
Okay.
Is that the dhikr, the recitation of the Quran, the elimination of the, extra things is what gives you the barakah to then accomplish what these people are accomplishing. And that was a really big mind shift for me, was that I'm not going to be able to accomplish anything in my life unless the Quran is the first priority. Because that's what's the fuel for everything else that we're able to do.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah.
And I think because most Muslims, myself included, have a hard time digesting that.
Like, what do you mean?
Because I think we are so materialist in our worldviews that we hear something, like you hear about Karamat, right?
Yeah.
You hear about, like, it's a previous time. There was like, or I'll hear Saad Qadri will tell a story.
Yeah.
That's something that happened to him. And you would like have some excuse to why, some like reason, some material reasoning to behind, try to.
But think about Ramadan.
Yeah.
Like think about those times in your life where like you're on the path.
Sure.
You're pure. You're not watching crap. You're not listening to crap. You're not doing crap. Your life is different. Like I almost feel like you have that barakah in your time. I don't think you can knock it unless you try it. Right? And I think it's an experiential thing more than
That's
academic
true.
thing.
That is true. I heard there's somebody got on the podcast. I don't know if you heard of Ustad Nu Saunders.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You know Ustad.
Yeah.
So Ustad Nu is like the guy. I think he's one of these guys that's like helping people connect to the Quran again, right? That's how I look at him, right? And so I was in a clubhouse room with him because my friend Ali shout out to Ali from the Maliki Click channel.
Oh yeah,
Ali,
he blew up out of nowhere.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Ali has been hosting, he's doing some stuff with Ustad Nuh on Clubhouse, and I remember he was talking about like if you have a hujjah, and the thing is Ustad Nuh was on TMM, was on Mad Mamluks, and I've got his number, so sometimes I'll send him a WhatsApp voice note with the question.
Yeah.
But he was like just telling me like one time I was going through some hardship on something, right, and I remember, and sometimes when you go through a hardship, you feel like you need that hardship to be alleviated for you to be satisfied, right? And that's not necessarily the case. So the example was that he was like, well, if you read Surah Yasin in the morning and the evening, and you would make dua for the as a hajjah, for the need, then like just do that, right? And then you can reduce to one if it because you still read Surah Yasin at least once a day,
sure,
right? So I remember I was like 2-3 weeks doing it, and this hardship wasn't lifted.
Yeah.
But I became content with it.
SubhanAllah, right?
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Right? Now, granted, then I kind of like got lazy and I slipped up, and then I started caring about the hardship again.
Think about, there's this book called Think and Grow Rich.
By Napoleon Hill.
Napoleon Hill.
Yeah.
What's his thing? Every morning for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, concentrate on this thing. In the night, concentrate on this thing. Write down your goals. Write down. Like, how is that? People will jump onto that bandwagon and say, yes, we're going to do this. And they see their life change. But why is that different now when we're talking about Islamically?
Well, I think even Muslims are questioning that kind of mindset. Like when we did the interview with Muhammad Sharif on Mad Mamluks, because Muhammad Sharif has that kind of like, he was known for you making dua, like go big and like make dua for things, right?
Yeah.
And then people would say, well, what if it's not in your qadr? Or, isn't this... They would even question that. They were like, you can't speak things into existence. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? So I think people become so skeptical
because they have this external locus of control rather than internal locus of control. And I think all these personal development guys, this is what they're talking about.
Right.
And I think that's what the Soph is talking about. That's what Islam is talking about.
Right.
Is that if you want to, you can't change the people unless you change yourself.
Right.
And I think that's what it's all about. If that excuse of that exact excuse is a symptom of you having an external locus of control, in my opinion. That if that's the first thing that comes to your mind, that this is not going to do anything,
right?
Then you're relying on external factors rather than your own motivation and your own internal state of mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just like, because I'm also frustrated because I definitely buy it, right? Yeah. And I think you and I've had friends who like been overseas and interacted with Awliya, but there's Awliya in America.
There is absolutely.
And then you see stuff happen, you really can't argue with it.
But see, you don't even have to go to that level. Like these dudes that we just named.
Yeah.
And again, Allah knows who they are and whatever, right? But we don't have to go that high.
Yeah.
It's those everyday people who are accomplishing things you don't know.
Right.
Right? And it's because of the barakah of the Quran, the barakah of going to the masjid, the relationship they have with their parents. Like, that is what's giving you that calmness and that peace in order for you to accomplish what you need to accomplish. If you have problems with your wife, you have problems with your kids, you have problems at work, you're stressed out, you're not going to accomplish anything. How is that illogical? Or why? I don't see why people don't buy that.
There's a... See Omer Hasib, Omer.
Yeah. Mashallah.
He was a year ago. He's telling me that when I was getting blasted for the Richard Spencer episode, right?
Yeah.
And it was really if I did digital minimalism, it wouldn't have affected me as much because I wouldn't be checking Twitter, check notifications all the time, right? 'Cause my notifications blew up like crazy, right? And he was like, "Listen, man, this is where you need to your dhikr and your awrad and all that stuff has to be on point because." You need to have the spiritual apparatus to withstand this stuff.
Yes, 1000%.
Right? Because and even in work, if something goes, I'm not very stressed at work, right? I'm pretty much feel like I'm on top of things, but sometimes things happen out of your control. So recently at work we had an incident where we're going through right now. So we make important product to service healthcare diagnostic patients across the world. And we have a certain machine that, is is an old machine, but it's very important to the business.
Mm-hmm.
And each machine has certain parts that like sometimes they become obsolete. People don't make them anymore.
Sure.
And we've known that this has been an obsolete part for about a few years. So I remember, and I think the mindset was always like, okay, if this goes bad, we're hoping long term we can get new equipment in that can service it a bit. In the meantime, we got to keep it going. And if it does go bad, then we have a contingency plan to kind of like, move it to other assets that they can make the product. So this just happened. It finally went bad.
Oh man.
Right? And the contingency plan, I think, that we thought we had wasn't gonna work as robust as we needed. Right? And so now you're like, you're kind of all of a sudden you're like stressed. You're like thinking about like, and even at my level, I'm not super high up like director or VP or anything. I imagine with my director, like I see him like kind of going through. He does a nice job of like, he's not even Muslim, right? But I see how they're able to like, I probably process it in a certain way, and I'm being a little. I feel pressure on my team because my team's kind of involved in this pretty closely.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, and sometimes I'm like, man, I know I've been slacking on my adhkar. I think a lot of it is just that. It's like if you don't have that part dialed in, you need to. And I like what Umar said. It's a spiritual apparatus. It's like a shield.
It is a shield, exactly.
You know what I mean? I think people. That's where it goes back to. But you go to the deep work. Because deep work, you're talking about deep life. That spiritual point of thing. The other thing that like I think that I think guys are sleeping on. So we mentioned Quran. We mentioned the spiritual growth. I think just learning ilm.
Yeah.
Because how often do we see on social media now that people just say whatever they want about Islam?
Dude, it's so sad, bro. So I don't know if you know, but so I did the Sheikh al-Hind program at Dawah.
Okay.
And it's like a 2-year. It's 1 year if you do it full time.
Yep.
2 years if you do it part time. But
Yep.
really, all that it taught me, it's an overview of what you don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like basically, you go through this 2-year program to figure out this is what you don't know about Islam.
Even though you did all the Darul Hikmah stuff early.
I did all the Dawah Hikmah stuff. I love to read. All I do is read. But even then, like, you just realize you don't know jack crap, and you realize that you shouldn't be talking about Islam at all. At the very least. But yeah, you're right. I think that we do need some type of structured Islamic learning.
Yeah.
We have 20 years of secular knowledge.
Yep.
And we're at a first grade level.
Right.
We barely know fa'ala, fa'alu. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's like first grade stuff.
Yeah. Right.
And that's a good point, bro.
Because I think that's where I was telling Maulana Bilal this on the Mad Mamluk several years back, that I feel like I have this like anxiety that I'm living in Chicago. I didn't grow up in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. Not much of the culture. The culture of Islam there is much different, right? You're in Chicago. You have access to all these mashayikh scholars, centers of knowledge, right? It's almost like you're spoiled.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I like. So when I first got here, I would be like, man, it's like a kid in a candy store. Because like, you go to a place where you had very limited access to that kind of these lessons. And when I got here, I was like, you could literally find a dars every night somewhere in Chicagoland, right?
Yes,
Easily.
You
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's how I met Mufti Azim back in the day. Because Mufti Azim used to be the imam at Frankfurt Mosque. When I first moved to Chicagoland, I was in the Oak South suburbs. So he'd have like 2 or 3 classes a week at the Frankfurt Mosque. And I was like, for me, a 15-minute drive, it wasn't that bad. It's not like driving up to like Lombard or Naperville. Mm-hmm. So I go there, and then on weekends you could do other classes and stuff. So it was, but again, you're not married then. And I think a lot of times, and I mentioned this with the interview I did with Dawood Yassin, is that a lot of guys sometimes they stop when they get married.
They stop when they get married, but the other problem is that we kind of have that problem where you're digging all these holes, right? Like you go over here, you listen to a tafsir Sunday morning with Sheikh Amin. You go over here, you learn Monday manners over here. You're digging a hole over here. You're not going to get anywhere, right? And I think that
you're not part of a program.
You're not part of a program.
System, yeah.
You got to dig a deeper hole,
right?
Deep work, right?
Yeah.
Deep life. You got to pick Darul class and pick something, and just dive in and go. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big problem that we have is that you're right. Once you get married, you don't go anywhere. There's no more MSA. There's no more anything for you to really have time for.
Yeah.
But now you have all these options, whether it's online or in person or after Fajr or whatever. But we got to pick a program and go.
But like, I think people are still hung up on this idea of like, how do I know? Because they're going to invest. How do I know this program is right? It's authentic. All that stuff, right?
okay, I mean, each major city has something. I think if most of the scholars or the majority of the scholars are supporting it,
Yeah.
you know it's legit.
Right.
Like you know that Dar al-Qasim's legit. You know that Dar al-Salam's legit. You know Qalam is legit. You know that, whatever online, if a majority of scholars are supporting it, you know it's legit.
The problem is some people have been so brainwashed by certain ideologies that every alim is corrupt. You know what I'm saying? Like,
but then if they think they're corrupt, then why would they even care about studying Islam?
Well, I think they want to study, but they're going to the wrong sources, right? In some ways.
Like, can you give me an example?
I mean, there's certain online personalities who people think are alim. They might not even know Arabic. I don't want to name them by name, but
okay.
Yeah,
I mean, that's not traditional knowledge. You need traditional knowledge. And the other thing that I've realized, it actually came from how to read a book.
Can you make the case for the, because like we have about traditional, I'm talking about the whole isnad.
I'm talking about isnad.
Yep.
And I'm talking about grammar.
Right.
I'm talking about rhetoric.
Yep.
And I'm talking about balagha.
Okay.
Okay, which is rhetoric and logic. Okay, so in how to read a book,
yeah,
what they talk about is knowledge before, like a liberal arts degree,
right,
was something like the elite used to do.
Okay.
Right, because they learned these three things. They learned grammar,
yep,
they learned rhetoric, and they learned logic.
Right.
Because that's the basis for all other knowledge.
Right.
Okay? And what's beautiful, and I realized this later on in life, was that the Islamic curriculum, the traditional Islamic curriculum, is based really on those three things.
Yeah.
Right? When your first year of Islamic school, or traditional studies, is grammar.
Yep.
And you're thinking, so why the heck do I need to learn grammar? But that's helping your logic. When you learn Nahu, you're learning not logic at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's all a formula, And so what I would say is that traditional knowledge is a basis for you to learn other knowledge. When you think about grammar and you talk about wudu,
yep,
how is that connected? Right? And when you think about law, for example,
okay,
how is grammar related to the outcome of a particular case? Well, when it comes to, washing up to your elbows or to your elbows,
right,
that's a very big fiqh discussion.
Yeah.
But grammar is what's going to lead to that discussion.
Okay.
And just like you're supposed to wipe to a certain spot, those same principles are now going to come into play when you talk about land ownership, when you talk about business ownership, when you're talking about all these higher level fiqh discussions. It all starts from the bottom of grammar, logic, and rhetoric.
Okay.
And so the traditional curriculum is teaching you that. So that as you zoom out in the Islamic paradigm, you're able to see how it all fits together.
Right.
And you heard Mufti Hussein Kamani's thing about how the Hanafi fiqh is like a logical statement almost.
Yep.
And you can see how the school of Imam Abu Hanifa, how certain rulings, they all make sense together because it's one big usul.
Right.
But if you don't start from the bottom,
yeah,
you're never going to understand that. And
right,
same with law. If you don't know how to read,
yeah,
if you don't understand grammar and logic,
right,
how the heck are you going to become a lawyer?
Right.
And so when somebody opens up a book of statutes as like a layman,
yeah,
they open up the statutes and they read that, something about this law, and you go and you try to quote that, you're just stupid. Like, any lawyer's going to know that you don't know what the hell you're talking about, because you don't understand the way of interpretation or how that interacts with this or how that interacts with that.
Right.
So why would that be any different in the Islamic paradigm?
Well, it's almost like this, like it's like the epistemology.
Exactly. Great point.
You know what I mean? It's like you start with the foundation.
Yes.
And I think that's where, again, the deep, like the social media rhetoric is that people, like, you know it when it's something you may have studied yourself. Mm-hmm. When you see someone like quote some nonsense, like so-and-so's a scholar.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, you know that, no, he ain't a scholar. You just know, right? But at the same time, we fall into the trap when it comes to things like, let's say American politics, right?
Yeah.
Or economics. There's policies being passed, there are economics. Different politicians have policies, To me, I'm not saying you have to be well-read on politics.
Sure.
I'm saying that it might be a part of the deep light for some people, if that's something you care about, right? But I think if you're going to pontificate about it, you shouldn't pontificate about it without knowing it.
100%.
That's my point. That's kind of my thing, right?
Yeah.
If you're not going to care about it, if it's like, I'm not saying you have to. I don't think Like Sheikh Yasser Qadhi talks about in his interview with me that he's never voted in his life.
Yeah, that was interesting.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And maybe because he himself doesn't like, maybe it doesn't interest him as much.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't interest you, like part of my thing is, as I want to push these guys, you know, and sisters. Sorry, like I mean, I think they'll
Sisters doing well, bro.
I think they'll benefit it, but I think the sisters need their own podcast platforms too.
I agree.
I think that's part of the thing is that like they look to us, and some sisters actually enjoy the guys' conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that feedback as well. They actually want to hear what the bros are talking about.
But not many sisters are on YouTube. They're mostly on Instagram and other platforms.
Right,
you know?
different things, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's where if they're at. So to me is like, if you want that platform, you should start your own platform. I think you know, rather than critiquing like all male podcasts as a side note.
Yeah.
But I think it's if you're gonna pontificate, if you need to find out what actually interests you. I think part of the deep life that Cal Newport talks about, that I'm even talking about, is like do stuff that like makes you fulfilled, right? And really think about that. Like whether that's travel,
Do it, fulfilling for you.
do what's fulfilling for you. It could be, it's different for every person, right? If you really like if you really want to learn about the American political system, and that's part because you feel like you have a duty in America to like, you know, learn about it, and there's local candidates and there's issues in your community you want to support, or you want to get on board with, you want to run for school board, that's a thing for you, right?
Yeah.
Because I have a friend in Columbus, Ohio, who's on a city council, right? And he was instrumental in like stopping a lot of like the gender fluid stuff being shoved in their school district. You know,
Yeah.
he was that was something he was able to do. He's now going to be running. I think he's running for a state rep, right? So, but that's within. But he has got. But then you go in there and you learn that system.
Yeah.
The foundations of politics, of the political system.
And I think that's a good point. Your point about learning doesn't have to be Islamic learning.
Yeah.
Right? It could be any type of learning. Whatever
Right.
is going to drive you forward.
I mean, I think for Muslim men, the basics is you have to know front of the line.
Yeah, of course.
That's non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And I think it would be a disservice. I would also include Arabic. I think people want to like slack. You got to know how to read Quran.
Yes.
You can. It's unacceptable that you have to do salah and your Quran is broken.
I agree.
You know what I'm saying? I think Arabic, even that I feel like should be pushed. Like I feel like there's a component with like learning, even if you're going to do Fard al-Ain only.
Yeah.
I mean, don't you want to like? I'm like logically, don't you want to like get something out of your prayer? Yeah, I think there's at least even Islam. If it doesn't interest you, I think so many guys are like, well, I don't know anything. Like you can't like not know anything either. You have to have a basic level. But if it's interesting to you, we have like friends who are like studying like they're programmers and they're doing like bachelor's program Darul Qasim, and that's what floats your boat, right?
Sure, yeah.
Or if you want to like learn a specific thing in depth in the Islamic tradition, that's cool too, right? Yeah. It doesn't have to be. It's not like a pro. But I agree with you that dabbling in digging different holes isn't going to work either.
100%.
And I think you have to have a system, and maybe you have to have some accountability, some control set up, right? But I think at the end of the day, it's like find some hobbies. And I think guys don't have hobbies. We need to find productive hobbies, and I think that's a lot of it goes into it. So wrap it up here. What would you, when you think about what I just told you about the channel?
Yeah.
What kind of content would you like to see?
So me personally, I would like to see. I mean, a little bit of what we've talked about already, right? Like dealing with non-Muslims, for example, would be something like that I'd be interested in seeing. Fitness would be something that I basically not. We all listen to like these jagbags like Andrew Tate or Jordan Peterson, or like these guys who we find inspiration from, but in a very non-Islamic way. Like so much so that I can't listen to Andrew Tate. I mean, whatever, because he swears so much.
Right.
Or like I have to like block him from my thing because I don't want to see those thumbnails.
Yeah.
So basically, that manosphere self-improvement, that manosphere self-improvement content.
Yep.
But with the Muslim spin to it, with a way that I can listen to it with my family.
Right.
And I think that's really missing. How can I become a better reader? How can I become a better father?
Yeah.
Become a better husband, a better community member, or a better child to my parents? Like that's the type of content that I really look out for.
I got you. Okay. Yeah. And I think the way I hope to do with the first angle about how do you talk to non-Muslims, I think just talking to non-Muslims.
Yeah, just
I don't know how you do a talk like you do a podcast
101
title.
tutorial how to talk to non-Muslims.
I'd just be like, oh, wait. But I think people see this. I think sometimes you learn by example.
Yeah,
I think that's what it is. So yeah, I'm excited for what the future holds. I mean, as you know.
No, bro. No, that's very exciting, man. I'm very excited for you. Alhamdulillah, you've done a lot to inspire me to do something like this.
Yeah.
And you're very iconic on the Mad Luke, so I'm sure they're gonna miss you. And I think, who knows, maybe they'll come with a new direction as well. But
yeah,
I'm really looking forward to the content that you're coming out
with.
But
do you think, as you've been observed, you're recently more of a consumer until you're a creator, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any critiques of the Muslim podcast space? Like, what's your overall assessment of the space as you've seen it evolve in the last few years?
I still think it's lacking. And I think I've kind of fell off podcasts and I've become more on YouTube.
Okay.
Just because I got YouTube Premium and it's pretty much like...
But it's the same... You're talking about you're consuming the same type of content, right?
It is, but like Thinking Muslim, I really like that podcast. But I don't listen to it as much because it's not on YouTube. So I really like the content. I like the conversations.
Right.
But I want people to be more practical and more like direct.
Right.
Kind of like that... Not the Jordan Peterson style, but very well articulated,
right?
Really well thought out, well read,
right?
And being able to present something instead of just like random dudes who just sit around and talk, like you said.
Yeah.
But actually somebody who studied and now has presented their knowledge.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that's the deeper, the deeper content.
Right, and I think it goes back to like I want to like not ramble on here, but I think a lot of guys, guys are probably wondering what this deep life. I'm like, everyone thinks about, they want to read more.
Yeah.
We started with reading. They hear about, I want to get into writing, right?
Yeah.
They think about like something as a hobby. You ever seen Tim Ferriss's video where he talks about like tea?
No.
So Tim Ferriss is like his routine, and he gets like really deep in this type of tea he drinks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, even like being a tea or a coffee connoisseur, like sometimes you'll like meet guys who are like big into coffee.
Yeah.
Right? I'm big in like sneakers.
Sure.
Right? Or like men's fashion or certain pieces or like selvage dent. Like these are different things that like it's gonna be unique for everybody, I think. But to get there you have to like actually do it's not something that's passive. It has to be intentional.
Makes sense.
And I think that's where it goes. So it's really about again finding what's important to you. That's the whole thing about your values, and then a radical alignment with it. So, Naveed, man, appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we can do this again.
Anytime, bro.
You know what
Anytime,
I mean? And mashallah, inshallah, your channel keeps growing, and I see your growth in the last year or so, and even the production value is going up. And
Thank you, man.
Is there anything? How can people reach out to you or find out more about you, or if they want to do anything?
Yeah, so my YouTube channel, Naveed Hussain. My law firm, FaruqiHussain.com.
Yep.
I'm mostly active on Instagram.
Okay.
And Hussain13. That's where I post a lot of questions, a lot of polls about relationships. So I think one of my main goals is to revitalize the family.
Gotcha.
Right? That's my main take, and I think that's the direction that I want to take my content.
Yep.
Is how do we become better husbands, better children, and kind of make sure that our family institution is strong so that our society is strong.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, for my special guest, Naveed Hussain, I'm your host. Oh, before signing off, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe. If you want to support the channel through Patreon, you can by financial means, patreon.com/Sultans and Sneakers. If you can't do that, at least follow on the various social media platforms, Instagram. I don't do much on Facebook, but I still have the account. That's something I might have to like thinking about with the digital minimalism side, right? Like how useful is Facebook, right? Instagram, I might have to do a TikTok though.
I can't do it, bro.
You know what I mean? Because I've heard it's the way to get more reach from a point, but it's got to be intentional.
Yeah.
And then obviously I'm on Twitter at Sultans SULTANS and SNKRS. You could also hit me via email info@sultansandsneakers.com and check out the website at www.sultansandsneakers.com. For my special guest, Naveed Hussain, hosting me in his home, I'm your host, Maheen the Podcaster, signing off.
Assalamu alaikum.